With one voice we will sing. Every tribe and every tongue brings us harmony. With one voice we will bring heaven's beautiful melodies down to this earth as we sing to our King with one voice.
I'm going to do some things a little different today. A little different kind of sermon. I'm trying not to stand up there today. And there's going to be a few times in the sermon where I want you to respond. Cameraman, this is going to be a challenge for you. Let's see what we can do here. How many times have you seen someone whom you thought was truly evil or bad prosper? How many of you have seen someone who was, in your opinion, a mature Christian, someone who is seeking to be holy, who is striving to be good in everything they do, lose or fail? Can you give me some examples of either one of these? This is your opportunity. We're going to talk. We're going to dialogue here a little bit. Can you give me some opportunities? You all laughed when I said about evil people prospering. Give me some examples. Say it again. Adolf Hitler. He appeared to prosper. He appeared to grow. He was evil personified, wasn't he? That's right. Something else? A good person who seems to have a problem. Chris, go ahead. Huh? Korea's dictator. Kim Jong-un. That's right, isn't it? Anybody else? How about somebody who's good and their life seems to be on the rocks for some reason? Yes, ma'am.
A good Christian man that dies of cancer or
That's right. So my question is, how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel back in the battle? Jennifer? How does it make you feel when evil prospers in our world? Come on, I want to hear from you. Y'all are used to not talking during the sermon. I want you to talk. Yeah, it's confusing. We tend to question God. God, why do you allow these things to happen? So my question is does God play favorites? In fact, that's the title of my sermon. Does God play favorites? Some of you, when I greet you and I say, how are you? You said, I'm blessed and highly favored. Does God play favorites? I want us to look at a passage of Scripture today. It's Matthew 5, verses 43 to 48. This is one section out of the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount was an extended monologue that it was Jesus teaching, and he shares in a very unique way and compares popular opinion. You have heard it said, that it was said, with his own often expanded and sometimes radical view on the particular matter that he's talking about. This reading from Matthew chapter 5 is just such an example. Picking it up in verse 43, it says, you have heard that it was said, you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense to us. But verse 44, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the just, on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those, listen to this, for if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Don't even, the thing he uses here, don't even the tax collectors do the same? For if you love those who love you, what reward is that? Even the tax collectors do the same. And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Verse 48. You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. I want us to back up to this part that Jesus says, love your enemies. Love your enemies. What a radical concept that is. Love your enemies. Pray for those who hate you. Be perfect. That's a pretty tall order, isn't it? Let's break down Jesus' statement just a little. Maybe we can get some context to this radical proposal. But in order to do that, we need to zoom out and get a glimpse of the bigger picture. Who is Jesus talking to? You can answer. This is a give and take. Who is Jesus talking to? Mostly Jews. That's who he was talking to. Mostly Jewish people who had followed him. Who were the enemies of the people to whom Jesus was speaking? The Romans. That's right, the Romans, the Roman government, the Roman soldiers. Okay? The Roman soldiers represented by Roman legions who lived in their communities and whose heavy-handed, heavy-footed, I guess, in this case, boot, was on their neck all the time. But who else were their enemies? If you were Jewish, who else was? Not necessarily an enemy in the real sense, but who else were enemies? He mentions it in here. Gentiles, that's right. If you're Jewish, you weren't even allowed to touch a Gentile. Because if you touch them, that would make you unclean. And so if you've been told all of your life from the time that you're a little boy, don't go anywhere near those Gentiles, then you would see the Gentiles as an enemy. But Jesus says, love your enemies. Pray for those who hate you. Be perfect. Truthfully, I've never read anywhere where the Bible tells us to hate our enemies. What I do see are passages in the Old Testament that encourage hostility and retaliation. But there were other writings in Jesus' day that did in fact encourage the hating of enemies. There was a group of people, Jewish, who kind of pulled away from the general Jewish population in and around the city of Qumran. And they had something called the Manual of Discipline that commands this. It says, you are to love all whom God has elected, but hate all those whom he has rejected, including all sons of perdition. Okay? Perdition simply means those who are evil. Okay? So what was Jesus getting at when he tells us to love our enemies and pray for those who hate us? What I believe is that what Jesus was doing here is that he was raising the bar, so to speak, for those who would follow after him. He's raising the bar and saying, you need to conform to a higher standard. You need to conform to a higher standard than others. And the standard goes back all the way back to the very nature of God. You see, God's nature is love. When you think of the word love, you don't normally think of God. But God is the author of love. We love because he first loved us. And he commanded us to love. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your spirit. He said to love your neighbor as yourself. But then he says, love your enemies. Pray for those who hate you. God, not so much. I'm not so hot on this one. I can love you and I can love my neighbors. I don't know, unless a neighbor is one of those people that hates you. I'm not so sure about this one. But I believe that Jesus is making it very clear that we're to strive for a standard that is very godlike. In fact, he says it. Be perfect. He says, you want to know what my standard is? It's perfection. You need to be like me because I am love. I am the example, the perfect example of a perfect love. And Jesus points it out. He's very clear. He's saying that we should love those who will not only not love us back, but who very well may hate us with all that is within them. But you see, talk is cheap. It's easy for Jesus to say, love those who hate you. But did he demonstrate that? Well, we know that he did. When he's on the cross, his arms outstretched, he's in deep agony. One of the things that he says before he dies is, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Brothers and sisters, how can we forgive those people? How can we forgive those who flogged you? How can we forgive those who hated you, who spit upon you, who put a crown of thorns on your head? How can we forgive those who mocked you? How can we forgive those people? Love. Love is the answer. You see, too often we try to apply a standard to the world that was only meant for those who've been transformed by the blood of Jesus. I want you to think about this for a minute. I want you to think about this. We cannot expect the world, the unsaved, to maintain a standard that Jesus describes in this passage because it wasn't for them, it was for you and for me. If someone is acting out of their nature is that they're dead in their trespasses and sin, and so they're living out of their nature. We don't need to be angry with them. We don't need to hate them. We need to love them. We need to feel sorry for them because what they are experiencing is the result of sin in their lives. They cannot be godly. They don't know God. They have no concept of who God is. They're being who they are. They're unsaved sinners. The way they act is the way you acted before you got saved. Before you came to a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ. I know it because I've heard your stories. Some of you I knew personally. I've even got some before pictures. And all of us, all of you and me, were operating out of a fallen condition and totally, completely separated from God. So I have no right to ask you to clean yourself up. But I can love you. I have no right to tell you to get your life in order. But I can love you. I can show you Christ's love. In their book, Why Nobody Wants to Go to Church Anymore, Tom and Joni Schultz. Tom Schultz is the guy who founded Group Publishing. You may have heard of that. In their book, though, they have this little formula that they call the 4 acts of love. And I want us to break these down one at a time. Because I believe what's happening in the church today is that too many of us have become institutionalized. What do I mean by that? I mean that we have gotten into a routine of doing Christian things. We have gathered ourselves into a holy huddle, and all of our friends are Christians. And all the people we talk to on the phone and all the people that are on our Facebook friends list are the people that are Christians. And we have completely insulated and isolated ourselves from those out there who are lost and dying in their sin. And we gather in here and we circle the wagons, and Joe, we sing Kumbaya. While the world is dying and going to hell. And all we want to do is look down our nose at them and condemn them for acting out in their own nature. I'm proposing that our church start acting, and you are the church. It's not this building that got leaked on yesterday. That's not the church. You are the church. And it's time for the church to start acting out of love to those who have not what we have already obtained. So I want to give you this little formula, these 4 acts of love. First of all, you need to gather around you a few unbelievers as friends. You need to make an effort to befriend those who are not saved. They don't have to be the only people you hang out with, but you need to have some unsaved friends. And when the unbeliever says, I feel judged by you Christians, imagine Jesus saying, you're welcome just as you are. And if at that point, the church, you and me, would practice radical hospitality, would that show love? What do I mean by radical hospitality? That means that when somebody comes in the door of the church, or when you see them out and about, when you're going about your daily business, instead of looking at them with a sense of judgment on them, or disdain or disgust, because you don't agree with who they are or what they're doing, look at them with the eyes of Christ. The Bible tells us that we're supposed to look at the world and through Christ's eyes anyway. So practice genuine hospitality. That means that you might even be brave enough to invite them into your home. You know? Yeah, it's radical. I'm not kidding about that. It's radical. When the unbeliever, this is number 2, practice radical hospitality. It didn't come out very clear on here, but you can see it. Yeah, you got a little heart on your sermon notes there if you're doing the old school sermon notes. So you can fill that top left corner of that with radical hospitality. Number 2, when the unbeliever says, I don't want to be lectured, or you don't care what I think, imagine Jesus saying, imagine you saying, your thoughts are welcomed here. Your doubts are also welcomed here. Then what if the church practiced fearless conversation? See, the problem is we don't want to get into those kind of conversations because it's so much easier for us to talk about Christian stuff. We use our own Christian lingo. We have our own code words for stuff. And so it's real easy for us to communicate with Christians. We have a lot in common. You know, we share the same faith. Humma, humma, humma. But when we start talking to Christians, then they might bring up something that makes us feel uncomfortable. And so we just avoid. But what if we engaged in fearless conversation? Not just us doing all the talking, but letting them let them talk and us doing some listening, kind of getting some insights into who they are and getting some insights into what makes them tick. If the church did that, would that not show love? Point number 3. What if the unbeliever says, church people are just a bunch of hypocrites? Because they do say that. Imagine Jesus saying this to them. We're all in this together. And then what if the church practiced genuine humility realizing that but for the grace of God, we would be where they are right now. Would that show love? Number 4. I want to go back to that one for a minute. I want to go back to that one for a minute. Part of the problem that the world looks at us and sees us is that they don't see humility. They see us being proud of our relationship with God through Jesus Christ. We kind of wear that like a badge of honor, like it's something that we have earned, like it's something that we have worked for, like it's something that we have striven for, and now God has blessed us with this badge of honor. People that don't know Christ hate you when you act like that. They hate you when you act like that. Instead, we need to practice genuine humility. We need to say, look, I know that you don't understand all of this stuff, and that's okay. I don't understand all the stuff you're engaged in. But let's talk. Let's dialogue. And do that from a standpoint of not a superior person down to an inferior person, but one person sharing with another where they might find bread. Number 4. What if an unbeliever tells you, your God is irrelevant in my life? Heard that before. I got no time for God. I don't have time for your God. Imagine Jesus saying, God is here right now, and he's ready to connect with you right where you are. Then what if the church practiced, here it is, divine anticipation. Divine anticipation. Because you see, ultimately, you can't change anybody. You have no power to change anybody. Your job is not to get people saved. Yeah. Your job is not to get people saved. Your job is to share the love of Christ in whatever way works to reach people with the saving knowledge of Christ. It's God's responsibility to get them saved. You just have to love them. And what if we practice divine anticipation, realizing that God is up to something, and let's just carry this out to see what he's going to do? Would that not show love? You see, you need to understand something. Jesus is irresistible. He doesn't need your help. But sometimes we feel like he ain't quite cutting the mustard. And so we got to help him out a little bit. And so we try to do stuff to we try to finagle things around in such a way, finagle, it's in the dictionary, look it up. Okay? In such a way that we kind of trick them into getting saved. That's not what we're all about. God doesn't need our help. Maybe we think that, well, he's not working fast enough. Abraham found out that bad mistake, didn't he? He said, God, I know you're going to give me a son, but you're not, you're taking your sweet time here, so I'm going to make something happen. You know what the end result of that is? Islam. Yeah. Yeah. Abraham's first son, born to his wife's concubine, was it not concubine, but his handmaiden, thank you, is the predecessor to what we know today as Islam. Abraham, the father of Israel, is also the father of Islam, because he felt like God was taking his sweet time, and so he was going to move things along. But we do the same thing. And so we begin trying to motivate people in the right way by concocting all kinds of great ideas to try to help God out. I kind of get a picture of the guy in the progressive, I'm not promoting progressive insurance, okay? Disclaimer right here, I'm not promoting it. But you've seen the commercial where the guy gets so cocky and so confident that he goes up to the guy that's juggling chainsaws and he says, come on, let me have it. I can do this. I can do this. We kind of get that attitude as Christians. We were talking about this morning in our Bible study that we kind of leave God completely out of the picture because we've got this. How arrogant and how ridiculous that is. You see, what we need to do is demonstrate love. Genuine love, not false love, not... Listen, I had a guy, when we were newlyweds, I had a guy that was in our church. He was a leader in our church. And I was a junior enlisted soldier, and this guy was a captain. And back then, when I was a junior enlisted guys, captains were like demigods as far as I was concerned. They were untouchables. They were way up there on the chain. When I became a captain, I realized how untrue that was. But at the time, I really respected this guy. And he says, I want to invite you and your wife and our newborn son, which was the bad mistake, because you know how sometimes kids will do what kids do at the most inopportune times. But he invited us over to his house at Ramstein Air Base. We were stationed in Germany. And we thought, that's cool, you know, he just wants to have some fellowship. And we had a nice meal, and we had a nice visit with him, and he says, I want to share something with you. Amway. And for the next hour, he and his wife commenced to pressuring us to becoming Amway salespeople. Now, you got to understand, when a captain puts a little pressure on the sergeant, that's a lot of pressure.
Yes.
How fake was that? How ingenuous, is that a word? How ungenuine was that? We thought he was trying to be kind and loving us and caring about us, and he had a hidden agenda. See, the problem is a lot of people out there think that you all have hidden agendas. That you only love them because you're trying to get them to be like you. But you see, that's not your responsibility. That's God's responsibility. Your responsibility is to love them, yes. But then you need to leave that at the door. And you just need to love them and let them see Christ in you. Not because you're trying to finagle. I use that word twice in a sermon here. That's kind of scary. You're trying to make something happen here. You just need to love them like Christ loved you and gave himself for you. Sacrificially. Not unsacrificially. Sacrificially. This is what I'm saying here. You see, the problem with the church today is we start hiding behind our ivory towers, and we come in and we sing the songs of Zion, and we go out there and people never see the love of Christ that we've experienced. They never see it. We ignore them, we avoid them, we go out of our way to not engage in conversation with them. And I would propose that if we want to be who God has created us to be, then we need to start engaging in some radical hospitality, some fearless conversation, some genuine humility, and divine anticipation. Because God is up to something. And we need to be about what he's doing. In his book, 7 Habits of Outwardly Focused Churches, Tom Rainer, who is the president of Lifeway, sorry, not in his book, in his blog, 7 Habits of Outward Focused Church, he writes this: over time, listen to this, over time, most of the resources of time, money, and ministries have been shifted in the churches today towards the members of the church. Churches are now gathering in holy huddles with little intention of breaking out into a world of lostness and loneliness, and I might add, darkness. What this tells me is that we are real good at loving each other. And we are real good at loving those who look like us or who talk like us, who share the same ideas and ideals as us. We've got this holy huddle thing down to a science, but there's a whole world out there that is lost and lonely. And we need to take our message to the streets. Amen. It's time to take it to the streets. So back to the original question, does God show favoritism? The truth is that anyone can come to Jesus. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. So I think it's time for us to take the spotlight off of ourselves and practice what Jesus preached. Love our enemies. Pray for those who hate you. Be perfect. Love. Let's go out and love people. And let's be the church that God intended us to be. Let's go in prayer. Father, I thank you for your word today. It's a challenge.
With one voice.